I think the difference in my reaction when both of them went into prison was because I kind of I saw my mom getting taken away. And at the start, I didn't know whether it was true or not. I had no idea whether these charges were bogus charges. For the longest time, I thought she was being framed by people. I thought there's no way somehow something Sheena is gonna, come back, and this is all a big misunderstanding. But for my dad, just because I'm so sure, it's more than anything, it's his character, and everyone can vouch for this.
Hi, I'm Shoma Chaudhury. Thank you for watching Enquiry. I have an unusual guest on the show today. Vidhie Mukerjea is a young woman whose life was ripped apart at 18. The daughter of media barons Peter and Indrani Peter, her mother Indrani was accused and arrested for the murder of Sheena Bora, her daughter from a prior marriage, and Peter was accused and arrested as an accomplice. The scandal had many facets, and Vidhie suddenly found herself caught as collateral damage in a vortex of ugliness. She's now written a book called The Devil's Daughter about her experience, her descent into the void, her attempted suicide, and her journey back to mental health and recovery. At the center of this story is a difficult account of inhabiting conflicting emotions and a rupture with one's most fundamental relationship, a relationship with your mother. So how do you forgive someone you love, yet preserve your sense of right and wrong? How do you move beyond social judgment to reach for your own difficult truth? It's courageous of Vidhie to write a personal introspection about a journey as turbulent as this. So thank you very much for joining me on the show, Vidhie.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So Vidhie, let me start with the trigger question, which is that this is a book that really exposes such a time of turmoil for you. So what triggered you to write the book and share this entire thing with the world?
I mean, it was such a long process, when this whole thing kind of happened, I was in so much shock for years after. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that I was gonna pen down my experience. I didn't really know whether it was gonna be, I was gonna share it with the world, or whether it was just gonna be for myself. But I think when the pandemic hit last year, like everyone was in a very confused headspace, and I just kind of graduated. I didn't really know what I was doing with my life, and I was just looking at the whole world kind of blow up in chaos. I was reading opinions from people, this, that, and I just honestly decided to start writing and see what happens. And the more I wrote, the more emotional I got, throughout this whole process. So, but at the same time, it really empowered me, because penning down that whole experience, start to finish, I just thought that this is something that I have to write. It's a story. It's more than a story. It's a journey, and it's about the bigger picture.
I'm going to come to the bigger picture of what you wanted to share, and before I take you deeper into the really dark heart of this and what you've had to experience and process, I was interested that you asked your Bora to write the foreword for your book. And, she's someone who you had a very difficult relationship with as well. So what triggered you to ask her to preface the book for you?
Yeah, I mean,
and in fact, she talks about what a difficult, rude, difficult person you were to be with. And yet you chose her. So I find that interesting, that why did you pick her?
Yeah, I mean, so at the start, I think when all of this happened, we didn't really know each other that well. When I was 18 and she kind of came into my life full time, I would see her every day. It started off pretty neutral, as it does. But yeah, I mean, we really had a huge turmoil between us, for 3-4 years. Because I wasn't really the easiest kid. I was, as she mentioned, I was super opinionated back then. I was very kind of stubborn. And honestly, it's because I didn't trust anyone, no one even in my family, essentially, apart from my dad. I didn't trust anyone. And I was just super closed up. But I think it's once I really kind of distanced myself from everyone, my friends, my family, and I just kind of had this moment of I really got lost in thinking of what other people were going through in my family, and that I think really hit hard for me, especially with my aunt. I never kind of empathized with her at the beginning. I never thought about what she's kind of sacrificing to be there with the family, be there with my dad, give up her entire life in Bangalore and kind of help, figure this out. And the last year, basically, I think 2 years ago, we started after I kind of came out of this whole phase of being by myself. I went to her and I kind of apologized. I said I'm really sorry for all of it, and I think then we were able to really connect, because even before, it wasn't like we were always fighting. It's when there were really tough days, we'd sit together and we just talk about these things together, and then next day it's like we both forgot about it and just went our own ways. But yeah, I mean, I think if there's anyone who knows me really well the past 6 years, it's her, because she's really seen the good, bad, and ugly, So it only seemed fitting that I kind of asked her to introduce my book.
So, even before we come to the actual, the crime that your mother is accused of and the murder of her own daughter and your sister, which is like, it boggles the mind at every level, and it's such a difficult thing to process. But even before that, you've written of your mother as an extremely difficult, very complicated, and actually a fairly, I would say almost a violent presence in your life, even when you were growing up. So can you talk to us about your mother, as you experienced her, as a child, and what about her disturbed you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think as I got older, now I'm talking about now, as I got older, I kind of realized that parent-child relationships are incredibly complicated, and there's the stigma about mothers and daughters. And it was really tough for both of us, because she was going through a lot of stress back then, which I had no idea. None of us had any idea, what was going on back then. And it became really disastrous pretty quickly, because I was not in any mind frame to listen to her either. So it started off there, and it just became one of those things where anything she said, I wanted to do the opposite of, so it just stemmed from that. It wasn't only her, it wasn't only her that kind of caused this kind of atmosphere. It was also very much me, because it was just turbulent all around. And but yeah, I think as I became older, I started to understand, at times we are like best friends with our parents, and that at times we just really don't understand each other at all. And I think what the case was, probably my mom had a certain vision for me. She had a certain vision that she wanted me to follow. Maybe it was her vision, but I really wasn't kind of gelling with that. It wasn't my path that I wanted to see, and we really didn't see eye to eye. And after that happened, yeah, things just went kind of south. But yeah, now I'm understanding more and more as I get older. I'm really kind of flipping back and really examining those years of my life to kind of understand what she was going through and why she kind of enforced this atmosphere at home,
So Vidhie, because you've written, as I said, you've written very honestly and courageously about this extremely difficult relationship in your life, and you've described her as you experienced her. So, I mean, if you just set yourself aside now from this process of reconciliation, or at least understanding that you're on, but because you've written a book, you're also able to assess people for themselves. So can you help our audience understand the kind of person she was, because you're now saying that this was a classic mother-daughter dynamic, but that you've written more about her. She had terrible fights with your father, with Peter Mukherjea. She would lie. She was manipulative. She was also very focused on money. Like you said, her vision for you was external beauty, presentation of self, marrying wealth. So if you were to look at her just as a character for a moment to help others understand her, what do you see of her? Like, why was she such a turbulent person?
I think a part of that would probably relate to her childhood, because she had a terrible childhood, right? Like, she, as a child, she was raped. And when that happens, it scars you. And she is a very bright woman, right? She really strived for the best. And everyone kind of knew that. And I think I'm trying to kind of understand this myself as well, because this is something I constantly think about too. And I haven't really arrived at an answer I can just, speak about. But if I had to say something, I think it would be something relating to her childhood, probably. Maybe she had envisioned a certain kind of life that she wanted, and she kind of wanted to get it right for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that she was vicariously trying to,
Yeah,
in some ways she had actualized that life when she was heading INX, married to Peter. They were the power couple of Bombay. So in many ways, why do you think she had not been able to process that? Like there's one is her relationship with you, where she said she would hit you, she would beat you quite often, but she was also extremely high strung with Peter, like you've talked about through your childhood, terrible spats between them, her desire to alienate him from his son, not allow him to do anything for Rahul. So, as I said, you've been very courageous about writing about these very difficult aspects of a mother. It's difficult to own up in public to a very flawed person. So, do you have some sense of whether she actually needed mental help herself at that time?
I mean, you know what? Everyone has flaws, and everyone, I truly believe, needs some kind of therapy. Whether it's my next door neighbor, whether it's me, whether I think everyone has a lot of trauma within them that they kind of need to heal. And for her, she was so fast all the time. There was no kind of time for processing anything. There was no time for kind of healing herself. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that had to happen. But yeah, I think there was a lot of things that got lost in translation between communication. She really didn't understand me as a kid back then, and I don't think I really even gave her a chance to understand her. I was always too quick to jump the gun. I kind of didn't make it. As I said, I really didn't make it easy at all. But at the same time, I was a kid. So there's that side where she possibly could have been more understanding, and this is something I hope to find out more about, because I don't have like a concrete answer on why this happened. It's something that I'm looking for as well.
Yeah. So I mean, of course, it's just like the entire her being accused of this murder, being arrested, happened on the evening of your 18th birthday. And, the sheer rupture that this created in your life, Peter being accused as well, being arrested, your whole family really falling apart, and you discovering that, you had a sister and then who's now murdered, who you'd been introduced to as your aunt. So it's like I said, it is as difficult a situation for anyone to wrap their head around. But, you've described a process where your initial reaction was to completely swing the other end of the pendulum. So can you describe to the audience just that initial time? People have a fixed idea of how one should respond to pain. Can you talk about your process?
Absolutely. So with I feel when a person goes through a really traumatic situation, and to that magnitude, like the way I did, I really believe there's only two ways one can go about it. One is completely delve into the issue and try and figure it out and be there every step of the way and understand what's going on, or do what I did, essentially just completely shut off. I literally remember when the moment, I think, when my mom got arrested that day, and I was at home and they were taken to the station. And the way I found out actually was one of my friends sending me a text message saying, "Are you okay?" And I had no idea about what this was about. I thought it was all a big misunderstanding. And I was just like, "What do you mean?" And she literally sent me a screenshot of a headline saying, Indrani Peter being accused for murder. And there was a part of me that just kind of closed my eyes, and I was just, and then I just shut off. I completely shut off. And I chose at that point, I was like, I'm gonna pretend this is not happening to me. And it's really bizarre. I think it's really bizarre. I'm still trying to figure out why I did that, why I didn't kind of show any emotions. But I needed to go through that. I needed to go through 2 years of just escaping. That's what I was doing essentially. For like 2 years, I was just pretending nothing was going on, which is why I was judged by so many people as to, why is she smiling? Why is she having lunch out there? Like, why, all these questions. And I don't have to kind of talk to someone to know that that's what people are thinking, because even I was thinking the same thing. And yeah, but then it's bound to burst, right? The bubble has to burst. I really thought I was an anomaly for like 2 years, being like, okay, so I've gone through the hard parts. Now I'm not going to feel any of these things anymore. But it hit suddenly. Like, there was no warning, nothing. It just hit one day. And that's when I had to feel everything that I didn't feel for those 2 years. So I think it's each to their own kind of process. But most people, I feel, at least what I've seen is with my family as well, like when we went through this, we just kind of had to switch off that part of our brain saying that this is actually happening, I think only like 2 years ago did I accept that this is my life. And yeah.
So, I'm going to necessarily take you through obviously painful pieces of this, is that, so Sheena is somebody who was introduced to you as Indrani's sister rather than her daughter, and yet you had a great bond with her. So one, can you describe your relationship with Sheena and Rahul? And also the big question I think that just played on everyone's mind was that when she disappeared for 3 years, why did no one in the family even attempt to find out, and that just seems like such a difficult thing for any third person to understand. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, when Sheena was brilliant, we were incredibly close. Even Rahul, we all kind of had a very good bond with each other. For the first couple of years, I think once they start, bear in mind, I was quite young when all of this happened. So, but I do remember that me and her were incredibly close. And, I continue to miss her every single day. I mean, it's something I haven't even processed yet. And I haven't even kind of gotten to that aspect right now. But, and regards to why no one questioned it, I have no idea either, because I think it was just such a weird and strange point in all of our lives when that happened, because we were all spread out in different parts of the world. Secondly, everyone kind of got by doing their own stuff. I was just finishing off with boarding school. Things were quite turbulent between like the family at that point. And we just all kind of, we listened to my mom, we said, when she said it, it's really weird that we didn't question it. I completely agree. And I think all of us still ask that question, how could we not question anything? But the case is still sub judice. We actually have no idea what happened. Even like the words like murder and this, I really can't comment on these things because I have no idea what's happened. And we have to wait for the trial to kind of go on to see,
Yeah. No, I'm not going to get into the legality of the case. I'm talking about things that you've already worked up as I'm repeating the word courage to write in your book about, which is that and I'm trying to also, because I think what your book reveals is the sheer complexity of human relationships, and the spectrum you describe is of extreme self-loathing, self-doubt, hatred, anger, confusion, all of that, and part of that in this very difficult period, you're also talking about the kind of psychological bullying that Indrani was putting you and Peter through, whenever, and Rahul, that you were not allowed to speak of them, you were not allowed to meet them, you were doing it surreptitiously, you were afraid to ask questions because she'd blow up. So do you understand that as psychological bullying now, or how have you processed that? I'm not even coming to the final rupture. I'm just talking about how did you process the factor of having someone like that as your mother in your life,
I think bullying is perhaps a word that's not fit for this. It's more, I think she was probably going through her own level of stress that she imposed on us at that point, So I think rather than her going it through herself, she kind of, that's what I mean, like she imposed it on us. So it was really tough at that point for all of us to kind of say or do anything, as you mentioned, And whether I think it's psychological bullying, I don't know if it's bullying, but it is definitely under the bracket of psychological kind of something, it's something psychological, definitely. And she knew what she was doing. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if bullying is the right word, but I think she was more about kind of stringing it her way. And as I said, borderline manipulation.
Right. So, you've talked about, when you spoke about your own journey, there have been sort of very distinct phases in this process of healing. And one of the reasons we're talking with each other is to really examine the process of mental health, both the breakdown and paths to recovery. So it's interesting, like you said, your first reaction was complete denial. It was to party, it was to live exterior to yourself. Everyone just took you as this really callous person, superficial, etc. And that's how you were living. And perhaps that's how you were trying to cope with it. It's interesting that you went on this trip to South America, and you described this very transformative moment in Machu Picchu, where you feel like something happened to you, and you wanted to start to come to terms with what had hit your life. So, can you talk about that experience and what happened there?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, South America was, as you said, it was transformative because it was completely out of my comfort zone. I have never traveled like that, as coming from Bombay, coming from a very kind of, sheltered background. I've never had a backpack and gone with a friend on a one-way ticket somewhere. So those thoughts kind of came in from the time I landed there, But yeah, like getting up to Machu Picchu, it was a surreal feeling because it was something that I did on my own. And I was just so kind of enamored by this whole trip and my realizations that came on that trip. More than anything, it was the realizations that I had. It was how I knew how I wanted to live my life now. It was unlocking that kind of, I did, because as I said, like my mom had these visions for me, right? And I was very confused when I went into London. I was very confused because half of those kind of visions was still within me. And I still thought that, yeah, I maybe want this life. I maybe want to go into a corporate job. I perhaps want this, but I also want that. So when I got up to Machu Picchu, that's when I was kind of, sure that how I wanted to go. That's when I knew I had to leave Regents in London and I had to kind of find myself and explore what I'm good at. So yeah, it was a very special and deep moment for me.
So, Peter is like a big strand right through in your book, and he's the one person that you're completely sure of at all times. There isn't a troubled relationship there. And the first time they're both arrested, your reaction to your mother's arrest, even meeting her, is very different from the way you react with Peter. So can you describe that, your relationship with him and what was different in your reaction to both of them?
Sure. So I think my dad and I, like when we first met, I was around 3 years old, and my mom just, she got me in from Calcutta, like, and he used to always tell me the story. I was like in pigtails. I was coming out of in the trolley, and from that day we were kind of attached to the hip. And I think it's really special because I was young, but I still remember being unsure. Like I'm in a new environment, there's a new man in my mother's life. He's got 2 kids, how is this gonna work? And I remember this really clearly. And for him, it was like, how is he gonna, cope with a daughter? He's never had a daughter before. But it was seamless. It was so beautiful, and we are so close that we really understand each other. He is literally, I can tell him anything. I can talk to him about anything and everything. And I think that kind of a relationship was very, very special. And I think the difference in my reaction when both of them went into prison was because I kind of saw that. I saw my mom getting taken away. And at the start, I didn't know whether it was true or not. I had no idea whether these charges were bogus charges. For the longest time, I thought she was being framed by people. I thought there's no way somehow something Sheena is gonna, come back, and this is all a big misunderstanding. But for my dad, just because I'm so sure, it's more than anything, it's his character, and everyone can vouch for this. It's his character, it's who he is as a person, and the fact that he was gonna come see me. He was gonna come see me that month that he got arrested. It was on his birthday. So I was really looking forward to that. I was really looking to finally, spend time with him after months of him being in India and kind of going for questioning, doing this, all of that. So it really tore me apart, because there was one aspect where he didn't do anything, and the second aspect was I wasn't there. I was miles, 100, 200, thousands of miles away from him, that I couldn't even, speak to him after that. So yeah, it was really tough.
So, I'm going to come to those breakdowns, when you had an attempted suicide, and even your recovery process has had many waves to it. And I'd like you to speak about that. It'll probably resonate with others who are dealing with trauma in their lives. But before that, again, to understand this core rupture in your life is with your mother. And, you've had, for 3 years, you broke off. You had no contact with her while she was in jail. Because there was repugnance in you as well, and yet, so can you talk about that process? Yet you've made some journey back to being in contact with her. So can you talk about this entire process? What are the stages, and at which stage have you arrived at different ways of dealing with her presence in your life?
Sure. I think when this whole thing happened, especially right after my dad went in, it really got tough on me, because he wasn't coming out, he wasn't getting bail, nothing was happening. And I just arrived at the conclusion that this is all happening because of one person. She, like, why isn't she telling the police that, nothing has happened? Why isn't she saying anything? And I think that really got to me. And kind of when I had this confrontation with her, she ignored it. So it was really tough at that period, because at this point we hadn't spoken, and I just came back from England. And when I had this confrontation, I got ignored, So I think after that, I decided that I really didn't want anything to do with my mom. It was a very extreme decision, but also kind of understandable. And and I also just felt this. There's one part of that, but the second part is I kind of felt this pressure from the world, that, oh, if I am on her side, then I'm kind of painted in the same brush as her. So I didn't kind of have this realization until very recently, that that's a big reason why I kind of cut off from her, because I just felt judged if I were to stick up for her, which is kind of like really sad, but that's what happened, to me. And so for 3 years, I just kept going down the rabbit hole. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And that one day, when I hit rock bottom, after that, the first thing I started to think about was empathy. And that's when it hit me, that the same whole thing with my aunt, like just putting myself in other people's shoes, because I really had to face everyone's kind of criticisms and judgments, and people saying all sorts of things about me, for me to realize how it feels to be judged. And, like, no one's heard my side, but people are still kind of saying all these nasty things about me. And then I just kind of thought about my mom, and I really thought about her childhood. I thought about her parents and the situation that she was put into as a kid. And it really toughens you up, when you go through something like that as a kid, especially for her. She went through it when she was like in her early teens, and it toughens you up like you're a stone. So your EQ is non-existent almost. And when I started to realize that, I saw her in a very different light. I saw her in a way that she needs my help more than anything. And I have confidence in myself that maybe I can get through her at some point, and, ask her the questions that I need to ask her, and hopefully she can see it from my lens, hopefully I can be the one to kind of get through to her finally. So I kind of had this confidence in myself, and that's when I decided that I need to kind of have her back in my life to understand these things. And also I was just in a really bad space. I needed to know that someone loved me, because I alienated everyone. And after that whole episode that happened, everyone thought that I was just kind of no, I'm going to be like that, or I'm just going to get worse and she's not going to really do anything with her life. Always that troublemaker kind of kid because of her family situation. So yeah, and that's when I kind of decided I need to know, I need someone there for me. I need my dad. I know he's there, but I just need my mom, because she was itching. She never like stopped writing to me. She kept writing to me, and that's when I decided I wanted to be in touch with her.
So, Vidhie, it's still, I'm just probing that relationship a little bit more, because it's just, like I said, it's such a gigantic rupture. So, I mean, there's the culpability of what she's been accused of, which is in a legal case. So I'm not getting into that. But there was also, subsequent to her being accused of murdering Sheena, she was arrested. There were other uglinesses that came up, which was the divorce with your father, the INX case. And you've written in your book about this, the fact that money seemed to really dominate her life, and those are very agonized questions that there are in the book. So can you help us understand that? And my question on that would be, how have you reached, in everyone's mind, she's really the devil woman, and she is in many ways like a very loathsome, I'm using these words, figure in people's minds, because they're the external circumstances point to that, definitely. So how did you arrive at a space where you can relate to that without necessarily getting into whether, like I said, the legal culpability or not of this? How have you dealt with that? How have you learned to forgive without necessarily suspending your judgment on it?
Yeah, so in many ways, I truly believe that forgiveness is close to like godliness almost. It's a very hard thing for people to do. And when you forgive someone, you let go of the past. You unburden yourself almost, and that's what I felt. I felt it took me a very long, even long after I started kind of communicating with her, I still hadn't forgiven her. And it was much later, I think, only just a couple of months, maybe last year, when I realized what forgiveness meant for me. It's letting go, and I really needed to let go of the past. And I truly believe everyone deserves a chance. I'm probably judged for, being there for her still, and being, as I'm a daughter, being, kind of, a lot of people think that I condone what she did. No, I don't condone what she did, but I believe that everyone deserves a chance, and she has no one but me. And I know what it feels like not to be given chances. I've been in that situation. It's horrible, so, and as I said before, I truly believe, I hope that I can find a way to get through to her, to find some answers.
Right. This big decision you made, because like you said, there's definitely the world's judgment. You've defined a very difficult spectrum you're occupying between extreme hatred of your mother and a desire to somehow find the bond between the two of you as a mother and daughter. So can you describe that process? How did you arrive at a decision to let go of the world's judgment of this and try and seek some space which is honest for you, which may make no sense to the rest of the world? So can you talk about what was the trigger for that?
It wasn't a trigger. It wasn't a specific moment. It was a process. As I started speaking to her, I set my tone. Because she hasn't known me for the past 6 years. So I kind of set my tone that this is a no bullshit with me. If you try any kind of tricks or anything, like, I'm out, basically. So I set that ground very clear, and I still hadn't forgiven her at that point. It was it was a process. I just wanted to see what I was getting myself into. How was I feeling? Whether I was mentally comfortable. If I wasn't, I decided if I wasn't like mentally doing well with the burden of just like having my mom back in my life, I would kind of retract in a fair way, because for her, it was having me back in her life kind of changed everything for her, and I saw the happiness it gave her when I kind of, that first meeting I took with her, she was just weeping and weeping and weeping, and she just kept saying sorry and sorry and sorry to me. And I did the same. And that's when I understood what it meant to kind of be there for someone. I keep repeating, I truly believe and hope that I can get through to her. I'm her daughter, as she says that she's done everything for me, etc. And I've even had a conversation with her about those words. It's a very give and take situation.
So, I'm going to delve just a little bit more now further into this process of forgiveness that you've embarked on. And eventually I'll ask you what shape that forgiveness takes. But, the fact that she implicated, you're very, very close to Peter, who is your adopted father, but with whom you feel such a deep bond. But even after her arrest, she's implicated him in financial cases and in others. And that's where, you harbored a lot of anger with her as well, over and above the accusation of murder. So how have you processed that? So how are you processing her dynamic with Peter, and in the many ways in which you feel that she has let him down?
Yeah, see, I've tried, at the start, I really kind of got in the middle of it when I realized probably made things worse. So I kind of stepped back, and that's when I think I was in touch with my mom then. And she knows how much I love him. She knows exactly who he is to me, and she realized if she was going to implicate him in different things, like I wasn't going to be part of her life anymore. But yeah, I mean, it was a very stressful period in all our lives back then. I really can't comment much about it because those are like intricate workings of what was happening within questioning and all that, and I don't even know much about it. I kind of really, I know it's bad to say, but I kind of distanced myself from that whole process because I really focused on my feelings for my father and my feelings for my mother separately.
So, when you're talking about this, so from that point when you attempted, it was almost like you weren't even really thinking of suicide. You just hit rock bottom, but you woke up frothing in a hospital. And from there, you've kind of been piecing yourself back together. Can you talk about different kind of milestones in that process of recovery? For instance, therapy, did therapy work for you? Did it not work for you? What was that experience?
Yeah, so I think when I woke up in the hospital, like as unoriginal as it sounds, it was a sign. It was a sign to me that this was going to end a very different way, but it didn't for a reason. And that's the day I knew that I had to kind of start working on myself and just do better in general, and like figure myself out, figure my mind out, decode everything. And the first process just started. I was very lucky to kind of have some very close friends, that were there along every step of the way. So I kind of really owe it a lot to some of my closer friends that were there at that period. And then people were encouraging me that I should go for therapy. And I tried it many times. I tried it many times across 5 years, but it never really worked for me because I didn't internally feel like I wanted to go, is what I realized. I went back to Barcelona. I instantly kind of, just mentally, I was constantly like focused. And I started reading. And the first kind of book that I picked up was The Power of Now, very famous book. And that's what made me aware of what being in the present moment is. And I thought that was a really fascinating concept. And I just worked on that whole concept by myself. And then I decided, okay, it's time for therapy, because I was still having panic attacks. That year, my panic attacks got really bad because I was still recovering from the the whole episode of waking up in the hospital, I'd literally get like nightmares. I'd wake up, thinking that, oh my God, this is going to happen again. So that's when my anxiety was at its peak in the evenings and at night times. But I knew I was doing the right thing because I was thinking all these things. I've never thought about all these things before in the past 4 years. So I knew I was doing something right if I'm kind of, talking to myself about these topics and anxiety and facing certain issues. Then I decided that, okay, I need to try therapy. So I rang up a whole bunch of different therapists in Barcelona. But then there was just one that I don't know, I just felt like connected and drawn to. So I decided to go for this one. This also had a payment plan, so it was easier for me. And it was this woman. And it was so bizarre because we started off our therapy session just kind of like laughing, about different things. And then I slowly went into my whole, saga, essentially. I just told her what had happened. And that whole hour, I think this therapy session went on to 2 hours. She even like canceled her next therapy session. So yeah, then it really started to help because she was, more than anything, she was just helping me organize my thoughts. That's why I feel like therapy is so brilliant, and everyone needs a third opinion. Everyone needs to speak to someone that they don't know at all. And I love this whole concept of decoding myself. I literally started to decode myself like a computer. And in that same process, I started to decode my mom as well, because I was just seeing a lot of differences, a lot of similarities. And all in all, it was a really interesting process. It was tough. Like I was in tears every other day, but it was very, very eye-opening. And I could feel myself getting better every single day. It was like that kind of a change. And the second stage of healing, which kind of blew it all away for me, when just, took me to the next level, was shadow work, which is right after, actually in the middle of whilst I was writing this book. And I came across this concept. Basically, it's like a psychotherapy, and you work on it by yourself. And it's a process of essentially just questioning yourself and figuring, because we as human beings, we have two sides to ourselves. We have a light side and we have a dark side. And most humans, we aren't aware of our darker, self. And these are the parts. Yeah, exactly. These are the parts we tend to repress, like the shameful parts, the kind of regrets. You're just you feel shunned by society. All of those, the judgments, and you see glimpses of those when you kind of have an argument with someone. If you get irrational, or like if you kind of scream, or if you abuse or something, though, that is your shadow self coming out. And the practice is kind of being at peace with those things. So when I learned about this concept, I kind of downloaded this leaflet. It had 250 questions, and that like really intricate topics, topics such as your family, your sexuality, jealousy. So it's literally you're asking yourself the toughest questions, and you have to just be honest. So I did that for about a month and a half, 2 months, maybe more, I think. And it was really bad because like there were days I would just be crying for 4 days straight, and my partner was like really worried. My partner was, bless him, he was like really there for me, but he was so worried. Even I because I was just in this bubble, I even zoned him out of it. So it's a very intrusive process because you're starting to see all these things that you never knew about yourself. You really hate yourself for these kind of this moment that you're doing it. But then you just come out of it and you feel like a butterfly. I literally felt like a butterfly that was glowing after this one. It was like a flip switch, literally. Like one day I was crying uncontrollably, and then suddenly I just come out. I'm like, wow, and since then I've never had a panic attack. Or even if I have, but I know how to control it better. I work with myself, and now I'm subconsciously doing shadow work like all the time. So it's literally subconsciously in my mind. I'm so in control for now. I'm not really in fully control, but I'm so in control of my emotions. Even when I like argue with someone, if I'm arguing with my partner, or if I just kind of earlier when something would get me stressed out, my reaction would be crazy. My reaction would literally blow up and just, it would be crazy, and now I've reined it all in. I know how to kind of respond. I know what triggers me and how to kind of calm myself down. And yeah, just understanding other people.
I can see the impact it's had on you, and I'm going to ask you to decode yourself a little bit for us. But the one, I think that, when I was reading your book, the most difficult emotion at that, I mean, of course, we've talked about like the biggest rupture is obviously, if a mother figure is that's sort of compromised in one's life. I can't begin to imagine the violence of that. But the other thing that you repeatedly speak of in the book is the world's eye. Like you're often describing like you're in a crouch position because you're being judged. You're the daughter of a murderer. There's that whole tag that's following you around as well. And so that's like a sense of shame that you're living with. At which point did you, because I can see now that you're not defined by that. I can see that when you're talking with me. At which point do you remember when you could finally shrug that off? Do you still care what the world thinks about you, or have you actually shrugged it off?
See, I mean, I think there's always going to be moments that I'll care, like everyone cares about, like no one just doesn't care about what people think, and I noticed that when I, for example, when I come back to Bombay in the heart of where all of this happened, yeah, my mind does go into certain, different patterns where like I care, oh, does this person know who I am, or this person cares, but not in the magnitude that it affects me. Like, of course, like I'll wonder, but it doesn't, like, I don't care to a level that it'll affect my behavior with someone or even myself, and I think that line, I really feel embraced by my story. I feel it's really unique. I feel it's different. And I feel like the world needs to know about it. My perspective, not about the story in general. Like I understand I'm the protagonist in my book, but I truly believe it's the bigger picture. When someone reads my book, I want them to question themselves. I want them to question the society that we live in. I want them to question our conditioning, So the judgment aspect, it doesn't bear on me that much because I know what my story has done for me. And even my mother, like if someone is going to judge me for, standing up for my mother, that's on them. That's something they have to deal with for them to kind of sit and judge over. It's not going to affect me saying that, oh, this person is judging me now. What do? I feel so bad. Or I'm going to change. Like, no, I've got a very confident relationship with my mother. I know what I want out of this. I know the intention that I'm going in with, So the judgment, it doesn't bother me. But yeah, of course I think about, whether what someone is thinking. That's like very normal for me.
So can you explain when you say standing up for your mother, for audiences that haven't read your book, what do you mean by that when you say you're standing up for her?
So because a lot of people put labels, right? Everyone just labels everything now. And whether they label her a murderer or whether they label her, there have been horrible names that have been said to all of us, gold digger, this, that. And those are the kind of things I'd want to stand up for, because I like to remind people that the case is still going on. The media has played a great role in defining us, and now we're kind of having to dissect that because it's so easy for the media to just put something on TV and say, this is what it is. And then because of that, the whole population of the country is kind of, looking at it and saying, yeah, that is what it is. So that's a big lesson that I kind of learned, that's another reason because people just don't know the facts. People have no idea what the facts are. Even for me, like learning a lot through the past 5 years, getting more details. A big thing is kind of understanding my mom's side. I really want to understand my mom's side. That's why I'm giving her a chance because I want to know what went so wrong. Why is the big kind of question, So yeah, I just other people's kind of opinions and thoughts on this, like it doesn't matter to me, but like I'm gonna stand up for her. She's my mother. She doesn't have anyone to stand up for her. So I would like to be there for her in that sense.
So just final question, Vidhi, when you said that it helped decode your emotions, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what did you bucket your thoughts into so that, the others who are listening to you it might resonate for others who are dealing with complex emotions?
So decoding myself essentially meant like just understanding different sections of, like how I work, basically. Like, why do I do things the way I do? Like, when someone says something that triggers me, why do I feel so angry that I feel the need to scream back or like say certain words or like, talk in an aggressive tone or something like that? That was previously like why that is what I meant. Like, I would sit and rethink many situations that have happened in the past to me and just break it down, like, for example, when my mom got arrested, and this is the still I still don't understand this. The first thing I did was, because I told you I shut off completely, right? I shut my brain off, and the next thing I did was order pizza. And my friend kind of looked at me. I was just like, so, like, when's the pizza coming? And she was just shocked to see that. So decoding myself would mean like literally understanding that moment and why did I do that? Like, why did I have that reaction? And I keep coming up with different answers. Sometimes I come up with the same one, but every time basically I think about an instance, it helps me understand better, because everything is so intricate. Like, our minds are so intricate and potent, so if you kind of apply it in a way like you're solving a math problem, you come up with answers also so intricate. You kind of, then that's what I mean by the whole decoding. It's like a problem. You're solving the problem and then you're seeing the steps of how and why. So yeah, it's really interesting. And yeah, I broke down many kind of aspects. I broke down because I had a lot of like anger problems as well, and I realized I probably get this, from my mom. And there was certain, like, it was just a lot of mirroring, and there were like a lot of my qualities I get from my dad, and I was just, that was also another whole aspect of decoding, just understanding what I got from each of my parents and what has molded me apart from them, like what did South America do to me? What did staying in Barcelona do to me? What did my aunt's effect have on me? So all these like different things are decoding myself.
So today, if you were to describe, Vidhi, who are you as you sit today? What's your self-identity?
I'm super optimistic and I'm just really excited for life now. Like, I want to have a smile on my face as much as I can. And, I want to also go through all the hard things and the real things. This is why I wrote this book, because, we are so lost. We don't want to talk about things that are real. We're so kind of ashamed by our lives. Sometimes we're so ashamed of like certain aspects of ourselves. And for that, I want to say, like, there's nothing to be ashamed of, like, we're human. We all have flaws. We're all like messed up, but we have the ability to kind of be so incredible. So the way I would describe myself is just, I want to be optimistic and I want to constantly keep smiling.
Thank you very much, Vidhi. You've delved into a lot of difficult zones, and I'm so glad to see you so together. And the fact that you can speak of all this is amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.